It's not uncommon in wrestling for superstars to change name and change gimmicks. Those who get away from not deviating too much are usually the icons in the business, or those who have found what works for them and have managed to generate fan interest. Sometimes it takes a few years for a wrestler to find out what works, and even then, the wrestler can keep adding layers to keep the character fresh. Immediate names that spring to mind who have successfully done this would be the Undertaker and Chris Jericho. Some, however, never find that big money drawing character, and some even settle on whatever mediocre shtick the promoters give them. Some don't mind looking at what works for others and trying to emulate that. It really is a minefield of poor ideas and bad gimmicks, but when you find what works and makes money, then you're off to the races. One man who constantly tried to change his gimmick to try to connect to the audience was Ed Leslie. His Brutus the Barber Beefcake gimmick is what he is best known for, but before and after the Barber character, Ed tried almost everything and had minimal success. In this video, we will look at the name and gimmick changes Leslie had and why he constantly tried and failed at drawing audiences. Leslie debuted in 1977 and was immediately teamed up with Terry Boulder, who we know better as Hulk Hogan. This began a professional friendship between the two, which would ultimately lead to Leslie riding the coattails of the Hulkster for his entire career. Normally I don't like to be negative on subjects during these videos, but it's glaringly obvious and true that Leslie would use Hogan to try and better his own position in professional wrestling. The facts are there, it's no secret. Ed Leslie was introduced as Ed Boulder, the storyline brother of Terry Boulder. From the first moment that Leslie arrives here, he finds himself in Hogan's shadow, which is the position he'll continue in for practically his entire career. Leslie would then change his name to Eddie Golden and Dizzy Golden, probably in reference to those long golden locks he was sporting during this early period in his career. Eventually, Terry Boulder was renamed Hulk Hogan, and of course, Leslie would need to follow suit. Leslie again changed his name to Eddie Hogan and then Dizzy Hogan. Honestly, if Hulk changed his second name to Dickface, Leslie probably would have been renamed as Dizzy Dickface. Hulk Hogan left for the big leagues and joined the WWF to begin the rise of Hulkamania. Leslie was left behind, but this didn't stop him experimenting with a few new ring names. First, Leslie tried the name Brute Force, which just speaks for itself. He then found 50% of what would make him relatively successful when he renamed himself as Baron Beefcake. But already here we have had Ed Boulder, Eddie Golden, Dizzy Golden, Eddie Hogan, Dizzy Hogan, Brute Force and Baron Beefcake. 7 names in 7 years. Thanks to fictional big bro Hulk Hogan, Leslie was able to get work in the WWF. Under the management of Johnny Valiant, Leslie debuted as Brutus Beefcake and became part of the Dream Team tag team along with Greg Valentine. Brutus was not a barber just yet, but instead he was a vain male stripper, a gimmick given to him by Linda McMahon. Of course, before joining the Dream Team, Brutus Beefcake had the pleasure of main eventing shows with Hulk Hogan and also found himself slotted into the inaugural WrestleMania. After the breakup of the Dream Team and subsequently having his hair forcibly cut by Adrian Adonis, Leslie turned babyface and was able to get revenge on Adonis by completely shaving his head at WrestleMania 3, which earned him a new name and gimmick, Brutus the Barber Beefcake. At first, Beefcake was very much against this new gimmick and he even thought the entire thing may be a rib. There was only one man who could sway Beefcake's opinion on that matter, and that of course was Hulk Hogan. Hogan convinced Beefcake that the gimmick could be lucrative and even came up with the idea that Beefcake should cut his opponent's hair at the end of matches. Beefcake accepted his mentor's advice and the rest is history. Leslie enjoyed considerable success portraying the Barber from 1987 to 1990. During this time, Beefcake would render his opponents unconscious with his dreaded sleeper hold and use a comically oversized pair of hedge clippers to take chunks of hair out of his fallen victims. Fans loved it, but remember, this was the 80s. The Barber feuded with the likes of Randy Savage and the Hunky Tonk Man before once again teaming up with Hulk Hogan to form the Megamaniacs, where the team feuded with Randy Savage and Zeus. If nothing, the Megamaniacs gave us an incredible pre-match interview at SummerSlam 1989 that clearly showed someone was under the influence, and it wasn't Mean Gene Okerlund. Due to a parasailing accident that left Leslie with allegedly over 100 metal plates in his face, the Barber was forced to take nearly 2 years away from wrestling. In 1991, Leslie returned to the WWF portraying a completely new character who never received an official name. Fans refer to him either as Mystery Man, Run-In Man, or Fur Face, the latter because of the fuzzy looking star-covered mask he was wearing at the time, presumably to hide his facial injury. This character would run to the ring during matches, attack various heels, and then run away backstage. The WWF dropped the character after only a few appearances, so the purpose of the Mystery Man remains a mystery. Afterwards, Leslie came back as the Barber, and he began his barber shop gimmicks, which was made most famous thanks to Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Leslie's final WWF match occurred at WrestleMania 9 when he once again joined forces with Hulk Hogan, although he did remain active on the house show circuit afterwards. In a glaring example of how Leslie was attached to the hip of Hulk Hogan, when the Hulkster left the WWF, the Barber decided to sit at home. He wasn't seen on WWF TV again, and one can only assume he was waiting for Hogan to make the jump to WCW and put in a good word for him. And right enough, Leslie came into WCW riding the Hulk Hogan coattails and being referred to as Brother Brutus, a lovely pet name given to Leslie from Hogan himself. As WCW couldn't use the trademarked Barber gimmick or name, Brutus soon became the Clip Master. Think about that next time you need a haircut and you need to make a booking with your local Clip Master. The Clip Master character didn't last long, as Brutus turned heel, formed the Three Faces of Fear alongside Kevin Sullivan and Avalanche, and was renamed The Butcher. A name seemingly chosen so announcers could say how Leslie had butchered his friendship with Hulk Hogan. As the Butcher, Leslie would have his biggest match in WCW against Hogan at Starrcade 1994. Keep in mind, this is Starrcade, WCW's biggest event of the year, their WrestleMania equivalent, and Ed Leslie had found himself in the main event against Hulk Hogan. Of course, he was there to put Hogan over and make him look good, which should be an honourable thing in wrestling, but the Starrcade 94 main event just reeked of nepotism. We are far from done though, as Ed Leslie would continue to have even more gimmick and name changes. After getting kicked out of the Three Faces of Fear, Leslie became, wait for it, the Man with No Name. I'm not kidding, he was referred to as the Man with No Name. We can only imagine the brainstorming session here when Leslie, Hulk and Bischoff got together in a room, and after hours of crushing rejections, someone pipes up and says, "You know what, fuck it, you're the Man with No Name, because every name suggested here today has been absolutely awful." He was also referred to as the Man with No Face, even though Ed Leslie clearly has a face. Leslie disappeared for a while but resurfaced in WCW in 1995. He rejoined Kevin Sullivan in his new stable, the Dungeon of Doom, and along with this came yet another gimmick change. Leslie was now the Zodiac. The Zodiac's debut on WCW Saturday Night in July of 95 is one of the most comical things you will see in wrestling, just due to the fact that WCW was trying to push this as a serious storyline and faction, but here rises the Zodiac, looking totally coked out and only using the words yes and no. It was bad on an extreme level. Dungeon of Doom's mission was to take down Hulk Hogan, and believe it or not, they were unsuccessful. As it turned out, the Hulkster revealed that the Zodiac was a secret Hulkamaniac double agent whose purpose was to take down the Dungeon of Doom from the inside. Atrocious way to realign Brutus with Hulk, but hey, creative control, brother. Leslie's next gimmick kind of harked back to the Barber character. Leslie was now the booty man. He had an infatuation with his own booty, his finisher even being called the high knee. I kid you not. When we talk about fantasy matches that never happened, we conveniently leave the Booty Man versus Mr. Ass off our lists. But Booty Man was probably more ass-centric than Billy Gunn ever was. The character didn't go over well in WCW, even after he realigned with Hulk and was renamed Big Brother Booty. Seriously, I'm not making any of this up, by the way. The NWO happened and Hogan turned heel. When Hogan won the WCW Championship at Hog Wild in '96, the Booty Man came to the ring wearing an NWO shirt and carrying a birthday cake for the Hulkster. Hogan was having none of it though, and the NWO gave Leslie a beatdown. He would disappear for around a year and a half, only to return to WCW as Hogan's lackey in the NWO. Leslie was now known as the Disciple. He played the role of a biker bodyguard, and really it was all very uneventful. He ended up getting brainwashed by Ultimate Warrior's supernatural magic, which turned him babyface eventually, but he did end his career in WCW in November of '99. From here, Leslie would revert back to the Barber gimmick in smaller independent shows during the twilight years of his career. And there you have it, a legitimate maze of gimmicks portrayed by Ed Leslie, none of which were remotely good before or after the Barber character, and even the Barber gimmick was one that had a limited lifespan thanks to the ever-evolving WWE audience. There are more stories surrounding Leslie that need to be discussed in the future, from creating an anthrax scare to getting kicked out of Toronto City Hall while holding a pair of shears and claiming the mayor needed an intervention, but we will save these for a later video. Brutus Beefcake was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2019, and you guessed it, he was inducted by Hulk Hogan.